So Ergomed is a little bit of an unusual company. We have two sides to our business. The company was founded 20 years ago by Dr. Miroslav Reljanovich, who is a Croatian. He founded it as a clinical research organization, so that's conducting clinical trials on an outsourced basis for pharmaceutical companies. And then in 2008, he's a serial entrepreneur. He also founded a second company called Prime Vigilance, which is focused on something called pharmacovigilance. This is the monitoring of drugs post-approval for adverse safety events. So now the company has two parts to it. And then later on, he developed what we now call the co-development model. So this is a model whereby he wanted to expose himself and now public investors to the potential upside that comes from pharmaceutical drug development without betting the farm on the individual products. So we think we have a model of a way that we can expose investors to the upside without risking their entire investment. I'll show you how that works. And because of that, we think over the longer term we will be able to deliver outsized investment returns that you wouldn't normally get from a standard services business. And I will explain. So here are the two parts of the business. We call it a hybrid business model. On the left-hand side, we have our services business, the clinical research organization that I was speaking about, and pharmacovigilance. Those two businesses, this last year, 2016, recorded revenues of £38 million, or thereabouts, and growing mid-20%. So a nice business. We have ambitions to be a $1 billion cap business. So if you do the math, a 50 or 60 million pound cap company growing for 16.2 years consecutively will be a $1 billion business. We can't wait 16.2 years. Hence the right-hand side of the chart. We are investing on a sustainable way in drug development. And we have two ways of doing that. And we have built a small portfolio over time, and we intend to expand that portfolio maybe to a steady state of 10 drugs under development, because they fall out, they come in, they fall out. So on the services side, we offer a full range of clinical development services to our clients. So in the blue, you have the traditional phase 1 through phase 3. For those that don't know that, this is small numbers, increasingly large numbers of patients under clinical trial. Phase 3 would be a registration trial, which you'd submit to a regulatory authority, which would gain you approval to the drug, assuming the drug works. Phase 4 trials, sometimes those are conducted under the auspices of the regulatory authority. Sometimes they're voluntary. So these are trials that you conduct after the drug is already approved. You may be looking for additional indications. You may be looking for side effects. You saw a signal in phase 3. You need to study it further and for longer. On the right-hand side, we have post-approval work that we do through our subsidiary called Prime Vigilance. So here we are monitoring drug safety. Every time there is an adverse safety event for a drug, it should be reported to a physician or to a pharmacist or to an accident emergency unit. We take all those calls, we log them, they're medically reviewed, they're compiled, and they're submitted to the regulatory authority at the end of the year. At the end of the year, if there are sufficient side effects that come up during the year, then the regulatory authority may make you adjust your label, which is why on these labels of drugs you have it's supposed to fix this, and these are all the side effects. That comes over years of adverse event drug safety reporting. So you can see we have a pretty comprehensive range. We can do pretty much anything that any of our pharmaceutical clients would need of us. Our typical client is a small specialty pharma company or a biotech company. We do not do trials for the Novartis, Glaxos, Pfizers of this world. Those companies tend to have preferred provider relationships with the very largest CROs, people like Quintiles, if you know them, Covance, INC, etc., Icon. We are 115th the size of Quintiles. So although we operate on a global basis, we are not tooled up to do multi-tens of thousands of patient studies. So I mentioned the services. Over a period of the last 4 years, our CRO business, the clinical trials business, has been growing at a 16% compound. Our pharmacovigilance business growing at 40% compound over the last 4 years, and in fact it's accelerating. So this last year, 56% growth, all organic. Fantastic business. And I'm going to describe to you the different dynamics in these businesses. So you can imagine a clinical trial research business. It's very project-oriented because trials start up, they go on, and then they finish. And on average, about every 18 months, you have to replace that entire business. So you're continually feeding the beast. Prime vigilance, you can imagine when you have a customer's safety database sitting on your servers, he's not going to move it anytime soon. So it's a very sticky business. So every January the 1st, we know exactly what the base of business is, and we've got that for the whole year. It's a much easier business to grow because you don't have to replace. Hence, you see the differential growth rates here. So in terms of quality of earnings, I would put Prime Vigilance way ahead of the CRO. And because it's growing so much faster than the CRO, over time you will see that red segment become a bigger and bigger piece of the total, I would submit. Lastly on this slide, I just point you to this last line here, order backlog. So this is like a forward order book, and we measure this on a monthly basis. So at the end of 2016, this had actually grown to 70 million, but about 62 if you exclude an acquisition. So this is the revenues that are contracted that have yet to be invoiced. So already going into January the first year, we had 60 million pounds of business booked. It's not all going to come to pass in 2017. Some of it will, some in 18, some in 19, and then there's a long tail. But it's nice to know that we already have that amount of business booked. So we often get asked, given we're not on these preferred provider lists, how do we compete in the marketplace as a small CRO? And here's the answer. All CROs have project managers and study monitors. And those two people between them are interacting with hospitals where you have investigators, and the investigators are recruiting and treating the patients with the investigational drug. We have those two. What we bring to the party that other companies don't are two things. One is we have a study physician team. So this is a group of 12 to 15 physicians who literally fly around the world talking to hospital investigators on a peer-to-peer basis about the issues they're having, recruitment issues, patient issues, why they're dropping out, why they can't recruit, how to treat. We specialize in the trickiest of trials, where the patients need a lot of management, particularly in rare diseases. Because once, sort of self-evident, but of rare disease drugs, there are very few patients by definition, and therefore when you get one in your trial, you want to keep him in the trial and manage him accordingly. And often they're very complicated regimens. So these study physicians fly around the world, as I said, helping investigators. And then on top of that, we have something called a site management team. So these are 300 or so nurses who are stationed in hospitals around the world that we have consulting contracts with the full knowledge of their employer, the hospital. And we use them for two things. First of all, for feasibility studies. So we're able to contact these nurses and say, we have a trial coming up and it's in this condition. How many patients have you seen in the last month, 3 months, a year in your hospital? She says, none. Okay, well, we're not going to start recruiting patients there. This one says 30, this one says 50. Well, we'll go here and then there. So when we're pitching for new business, we have a unique insight into where the patients are, how quickly they can be recruited, and where to go and look, which other companies don't. Once the trial is up and running, assuming we've won the business, then we use these same people to help administer the trial. Particularly when you have a complicated regimen, you need somebody to come in precisely 4 days after the last treatment. You need these data collected, then 2 days, these data collected, then another 4 days, and so on. These nurses help manage that process because the doctors are far too important, as you would expect, to get into that kind of minutiae. So those are the two advantages we bring in drug development. On the pharmacovigilance side of things, now we have over 300 employees based in Guildford, Surrey, about 50 people there. We have about 150 in Zagreb, Croatia, and the rest are in Serbia. I get asked, why Serbia? Serbia has very high education standards, and there are lots of medics and pharmacists without jobs. And for a medic to have a job in industry is actually a badge of honor in a place like that. Places like England and the UK and Germany, France, the US, for a medic to work in industry, it doesn't have the same connotation because they prefer to interact with patients. So we find that's very fertile ground for us to recruit and expand the business. We have very high customer retention in this business. I was mentioning it's very sticky. We haven't lost a customer in 5 years. We've recently opened up a US office, and then in 2014 we won the Queen's Award for Enterprise. So if you ever come to our office, you'll see multiple pictures of Miro, the founder, shaking the Queen's hand. Now you know why. So to give you a snapshot of the company, you would normally expect a company of our size, £75 million market cap, to be a regional player and to be a subcontractor to one of the larger CROs. That's typically what companies our size are. We're a little bit unique in that we don't subcontract because we want to gain the full margin, and therefore you can imagine with 450 employees we're operating in over 54 countries. So we are spread pretty thin. We have to have a pretty lean organization, and there's quite a lot of moving parts in this business. But we have managed over 300 studies. We report 55,000 adverse event cases every year. And we've studied over 50,000 patients. So we've got a nice long track record of success. So that was the services side of the business. Now let's talk about the product side. And this is this sustainable model that I was talking about. So this is how it works. We search out probably about 1,000 opportunities a year, and we whittle them down to about 2 that we try and transact every year. And these are partnering deals with drug development companies. And what we do is we agree to forego some of our CRO fees, between 30 and 50%. So that takes us down to small or even zero margin on this business, in return for a carried interest in the product. And this is why it's sustainable. So we do it in a way we're not losing money, we're not making money on these particular contracts, but over time we're building up a portfolio of these carried interests. And hopefully one day one of them or 2 of them will hit the jackpot, and that will prove out the model. And we've had some success already, and I'll share that with you. So we typically, as I say, discount 30 to 50%, and we gain between 5 and 15% share of the revenue, whatever that revenue may be. So the partner sells a product, we get 5 to 15%. They market the product themselves, we get 5 to 15% of their sales. They out-license it, we get 5 to 15% of their milestones and their royalties. So that's how the model works. So over the last few years, we've built up this portfolio. There are, I'm looking above the grey line here, there are 6 products covering 5 molecules. We try and mitigate the risk by having different companies, different therapeutic indications, different stages of development. You will notice that 2 of these are in phase 3, 3 in phase 2, and 1 in phase 1. Coming up very shortly, we are expecting phase 2 data from Ferrer, our partner, on a product called Lorediplom. We conducted the trials, 130 patients across 11 sites. I don't know if you're aware, but these sleep agents like Ambien, one of the problems with them is that they are metabolized rather quickly, so they put you to sleep very effectively, but you tend to wake up in 4 or so hours. Then the patients take a second one, and when it's time to get up and go to work, they're all drowsy and hungover. So what Ferrer think they have done is they have modified the molecule to make it a longer half-life, so it will last 6 hours in the body, so you'll wake up less often and get greater quality of sleep and no hangover effect in the morning. If we hit all the 3 of those things, that would be fantastic. So these will be phase 2 data that will get announced right around the end of this month. So that's a big value inflection point for us, because although we don't disclose this, we actually have a double-digit share of this product. So that'd be very nice. And then secondly, we have phase 3 data from Internus Antares on a product that we've been co-developing called Zoptrex. This is for endometrial cancer. Again, a very large market opportunity. So these will be pivotal registration trials. If these data prove that the product works, the product will get approved in the United States and then ultimately in Europe. We have a high single-digit share of this product. So again, 2 very nice inflection points. Internus Antares will be right around the end of the first quarter of this year. So at the bottom of that chart I showed just now, this one, these 2 last products down here, these are the exceptions to the rule. So whilst we have carried interest in the top 6, we actually own 100% of the 2 products on the bottom. Why is that? Because we started talking to hemostatics about doing a co-development deal, and 2 things became quickly obvious. First, they couldn't carry their corner, so the deal was not doable as a co-development. And secondly, the opportunity to us looked so attractive, frankly, we bought the company. So I think we are the first first CRO ever to buy a biotech company. So we bought the company for £8 million up front and a series of success-based milestones. It has two products. They are in the surgical bleeding market. So on the left-hand side, you have a illustration of the vasculature of a liver. So if you can imagine you're resecting a liver because there's a tumor growth, for example. If you cut one of the blue or green arteries, you would probably deal with that either by suturing or cauterization, because you've got a lot of blood flow, it's gushing at this point. If you're resecting something in the red area, you haven't got gushing, you've got more of an oozing thing going on. And the way that is typically dealt with is with gelatin sponges. So the surgeon would hold the gelatin sponge on the bleeding area on average between 3 and 6 minutes until the bleeding stops. Then he sews up the patient. You can't sew up the patient until the bleeding stopped. And the sponge stays in there as resorbed in the body. So what this company has done, Hemostatics, is they have developed a synthetic 5-amino acid peptide, which is the little red piece on the end of those spikes there. They've pegylated it to a carrier molecule. And what this peptide does is it mimics the binding, the coagulation of blood that would normally take place in the body anyway. But what this has done is accelerates the process, because you've got like double coagulation factor. So if I take you to the middle of this chart first of all, in a phase 1 study, which uniquely was done with live patients, because you can't start cutting up healthy patients for ethical reasons, we proved that the product works about twice as fast as the majority used product called thrombin. So we stopped bleeding in 1.4 minutes compared to 3 to 6 minutes for thrombin. It was actually more effective, so it stopped more bleeds 95% of the time, and you can see less so for the comparator products. And this might actually turn out to be the major advantage of these products. They are ready to use. So thrombin, which is most used today, is harvested from blood, from human or porcine or bovine blood. It is an organic product and therefore is not stable. It degrades at room temperature. So to make it useful, the product is lyophilized, like freeze-dried coffee, freeze-dried, put in a vial, and then to be used, it has to be thawed and reconstituted with saline. So you can imagine you've got the patient bleeding on the table here, and you're mixing this stuff up on the side, more bleeding. It takes about 8 minutes to do that. So our product is, because it's synthetic, it's stable at room temperature. You just pull it out of the fridge, use it what you need, put it back. So it's ready to use, so it will be more effective and cheaper, and also from blood-free source, so there's less chance of cross-contamination. So there are two products, Pepperstat liquid on the left-hand side there, which will replace thrombin in the marketplace. It'll be applied to a sponge and used in the same way, but faster. And then we have a second product called ReadyFlow, which is the same active ingredient, but it's formulated in a gel and can be used down laparoscopic tubes for keyhole surgery or puncture wounds. So the gel forms a barrier to stop the gushing or the oozing of blood, and then the coagulant takes over and heals the wound. So we're just about to kick off a phase 2B study for Pepperstat, and then we expect to have data at the end of this year or very early next year. The total cost for phase 2 and phase 3 is about £15 million. So that's the other reason we bought the company. There are very few opportunities that a company like ourselves could afford to take on, because most clinical trials run to hundreds of millions of dollars. This is eminently doable at our level. So we're very excited by that. So let's switch gears now. We just announced our 2016 trading statement, which was pretty well received. Revenues for the year were 38 million, up 26% on the prior year. We won a total of 42 million pounds of new business in the year, which was up 50% on the prior year. And our backlog at the end of the year was actually 70 million, compares with 59 million at the end of the previous year. So we were in pretty good shape going into 2017. These are the sort of corporate milestones we recorded in 2016. I won't go through them all, just to say there were 4 acquisitions. Hemostatics, the biotech company I mentioned. There were 2 CROs in Germany that we acquired. And then right at the end of the year, in November, we acquired another pharmacovigilance company called Pharmavent, based in the Czech Republic. So overall, pretty busy year for us. In terms of news flow, coming up in 2017, I mentioned the Ferrer and Aeternis Antares clinical data. We have hemostatic study starting, and in 2018 we have a whole raft of data, clinical milestones that I think will have potential value-enhancing opportunities. We're targeting 2 co-development deals a year until we get to a steady state of 10, and then we're working on other services acquisitions. There's the particular focus on pharmacovigilance because of the nature of that business, and a particular focus on the US where we're underrepresented currently. So this last slide is a little bit naive, but it was designed to illustrate what I was talking about at the very beginning, what our business model is. So the light blue piece at the bottom, if you can imagine this is 5 years, you could imagine that growing at the current rate, just the services business alone should treble the value of Ergomed, just the services business. And then the dark blue piece represents the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune that come from drug development. We'll have barren years and good years, but something eventually will pop out of the co-development portfolio. And then if hemostatics, which you might regard as this sort of last one here, makes it to market, then we're off to the races. And we think we can probably deliver a multiple of what we could ever deliver in services if something comes out of this portfolio.